Okay, so we are now on national territory under the 1987 Constitution. What is the scope? It it comprises the terrestrial, aerial, and fluvial domains. So Article 1 of the 1987 Constitution provides that the national territory comprises the Philippine archipelago with all the islands and waters embraced therein, and all other territories over which the Philippines has sovereignty or jurisdiction, consisting of its terrestrial, fluvial, and aerial domains, including its territorial sea, the seabed, the subsoil, the insular shelves, and other submarine areas. The waters around, between, and connecting the islands of the archipelago, regardless of their breadth and dimensions, shall form part of the internal waters of the Philippines. The archipelagic doctrine. So the Philippine archipelago is one single unit. Hence, all the waters within the Philippines baselines, regardless of their breadth and distance from the nearest island coastline, are archipelagic waters. Within the archipelago, the Philippines exercises territorial sovereignty, limited only by the freedom of navigation and overflight in the UNCLOS. Now we have RA number 9522. And this provides that the current baselines law created base points around the Philippines to determine the baseline. And this aims to demarcate the country's maritime zone and continental shelf in accordance with the UNCLOS, and is not meant to delineate Philippine territory. Under the Treaty of Paris, baselines cannot be drawn from the boundaries or other portions of the rectangular area but the outermost islands and drying reefs of the archipelago. The Supreme Court held that RA 9522 is not unconstitutional. Therefore, it's constitutional. Why? Because it is a statutory tool to demarcate the maritime zone and continental shelf of the Philippines under UNCLOS 3 and does not alter the national territory. While UNCLOS does not bind the Philippines to pass a baseline law, Congress may do so. The law also does not abandon the country's claim to Sabah, as it does not expressly repeal the entirety of RA 5446. RA number 9522 uses the framework of Regime of Islands in determining the maritime zones of the Kalayaan Island Group or KIG and the Scarborough Shoal. Regime of Islands refers to any natural formed area of land surrounded by water that generates their own applicable maritime zone. Now we have the straight baseline method. This consists of drawing a straight line, connecting the appropriate points on the coast without departing to any appreciable extent from the general direction of the coast, in order to delineate the integral waters from the territorial waters of an archipelago. Note that this is the method prescribed under the UNCLOS and we are following that. RA number 9522 amends RA 3046, and this determined appropriate points of the outermost islands of the archipelago, then connected them by means of a straight line until all islands were surrounded and enclosed by the imaginary lines. RA 5446 states that the definition of the baselines of the territorial sea of the Philippine archipelago is without prejudice to the delineation of the baselines of the territorial sea around the territory of Sabah, situated in North Borneo, over which the Republic of the Philippines has acquired dominion and sovereignty. Maritime zones. In accordance with the 1987 Constitution and international law, particularly the UNCLOS, the maritime zones of the Philippine archipelago is composed of internal waters, archipelagic waters, territorial sea, contiguous zone, EEZ or Exclusive Economic Zone, and Continental Shelf, and all other territories over which the Philippines has sovereignty or jurisdiction likewise have their respective maritime zones as appropriate. Now let's go to public international law. So the concepts. What is the difference between public international law and private international law? When we say public international law, it is a body of legal principles, norms, and processes that regulate the relations of states and other international persons and govern their conduct affecting the interest of the international community as a whole. Private international law, on the other hand, it is that part of the law which state that determines whether, in dealing with a factual situation, an event, or a transaction between private individuals or entities involving a foreign element, the law of some other state will be recognized. Now, what is the relationship between international and Philippine domestic law? We have these two doctrines, the doctrine of incorporation and the doctrine of transformation. In the doctrine of incorporation, under Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, the Philippines adopts the generally accepted principles of international law as part of the law of the land. So, generally accepted principles of international law automatically forms part of the Philippine law without the need of legislative enactment. On the other hand, the doctrine of transformation refers to the principle that international law, to be binding and enforceable within the state's domestic legal system, must first be transformed into domestic law through appropriate constitutional or legislative processes. This doctrine applies to treaties, international agreements, and other forms of international law that are not automatically part of domestic law. What is the concept of monism, dualism, and auto-limitation? So in monism, both the international law and municipal law regulate the same subject matter, and international law holds supremacy even in the sphere of municipal law. Dualism, this theory affirms that the international law and municipal law are distinct and separate, and each is supreme on its own sphere and level of operation. Autolimitation. Under the principle of autolimitation, any state may, by its consent, express or implied, submit to a restriction of its sovereign rights. There may thus be a curtailment of what otherwise is a plenary power. So what are the sources of international law? First, we have the International Court of Justice Statute. So the International Court of Justice is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. Its statute is annexed to the Charter of UN and forms an integral part of international law. Its jurisdiction is over public international law. Contentious cases. So these are legal disputes between states submitted by consent. Jurisdiction is based on treaties, special agreements, or declarations recognizing compulsory jurisdiction under Article 36 of the statute. Advisory opinions. The ICJ may provide legal advice at the request of authorized UN organs and specialized agencies on legal questions under their purview. So who are bound by treaties and international conventions? Generally, only the parties signatory to the treaty or international convention are governed by these treaties and international conventions. However, there are always an exception. Treaties may be considered a direct source of international law when concluded by a sizable number of states and is reflective of the will of the family of nations. So what are the elements of international custom? 1. General practice. It is characterized by uniformity and consistency. 2. Opinio juris or recognition of that practice. And third, juration. So where does the ICJ applies? International conventions and treaties. International custom as evidence of general practice accepted as law and general principles of law recognized by civilized nations. Judicial decisions and teachings of highly qualified publicists as subsidiary means. Now, what is the effect of United Nations declarations, Security Council resolutions? So, the UN declarations are generally not binding as they fall under the category of soft law. They represent the collective intent and aspirations of the international community, but it lacks enforceability. Hard law means binding laws. To constitute a law, a rule, instrument, or decision must be authoritative and prescriptive. In international law, hard law includes treaties or international agreements as well as customary laws. These instruments result in legally enforceable commitments for countries or states and other international subjects. On the other hand, soft law means commitments made by negotiating parties that are not legally binding. So by implication, those set of international customary rules, laws, and customs which do not carry any binding effect whatsoever or impose no obligation at all to states for its compliance. What is the effect of actions of organs of international organization created by a treaty? Organs of international organizations. These are entities who derive their authorities from treaties and may adopt binding or non-binding acts depending on the treaty's provisions and the organization's competencies. Example, UN General Assembly. It adopts resolutions and declarations which are typically not binding but carry significant political and moral weight. UN specialized agencies such as the World Health Organization, they issue binding decisions within their mandates under treaties like the WHO Constitution. Another International Maritime Organization, they adopt binding regulations on maritime safety and pollution prevention under SOLAS and MARPOL conventions. Now, who are the subjects of international law? The states. So, a state is a community of persons, more or less numerous, permanently occupying a definite portion of territory, independent of external control, and possessing an organized government to which the great body of inhabitants render habitual obeisance. So, what are the elements to be considered as a state? You must have people, territory, government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other states. When we say people, these are aggregate of individuals of both sexes who live together as a community despite racial or cultural differences. Territory. The state must have a specific geographic area over which it exercises sovereignty. The precise boundaries do not need to be settled, but there must be an unidentifiable territory. Third is government. So, a government that exercises effective control over its territory and population. The government must be capable of maintaining law and other internally and representing the state externally. Of course, the capacity to enter into relations with other states. This is the state's ability to engage in formal diplomatic and legal relations with other states, which includes the authority to enter into treaties and agreements. So if you have this four, then you are considered as a state. Next, international organizations as subjects of international law. So, an organization established by a treaty or instrument governed by international law possessing its own international legal personality. You have to note that members may include entities other than states. And third, individuals. So, the status of individuals and corporations, generally, individuals, whether natural or juridical, do not have international legal personalities, except individuals may assume the status of subjects of international law based on agreement by states and in specific contexts, not according to general or customary international law. So what is the jurisdiction of states? Jurisdiction means the power of the state under international law to govern persons and property by its municipal law. This may be criminal or civil and may be exclusive or concurrent with other states. We have the concept of par in parem non habet imperium. So this principle translates to an equal has no authority over an equal. In the context of the jurisdiction of states, this principle is fundamental to the concept of sovereign equality under international law. We have the Lotus case way back in 1927. So the Permanent Court of International Justice affirmed the principle that states cannot exercise jurisdiction over acts committed outside their territory unless there is a permissive rule of international law allowing it. Also, a case in 2002 arrest warrant case, the ICJ ruled that a state could not issue an arrest warrant against a sitting foreign minister of another state due to sovereign immunity. So what is the basis of jurisdiction? We have the territoriality principle. Jurisdiction is determined by reference to the place where the act occurred or was committed. So a state takes jurisdiction over persons or events within its territory, and this usually refers to criminal jurisdiction. It is a principle of public international law which enables a sovereign state to exercise exclusive jurisdiction over individuals and other legal persons within its territory. Another is the nationality principle and statelessness. A state may exercise jurisdiction over an offender by virtue of his being its national, without regard as to where he was at the time the offense was committed and without respect to the nature of the offense. So, in nationality principle, as long as you are a national or a citizen of the state, you are governed by their laws. In territoriality principle, as long as you sojourn the territory of the state, you are governed by the jurisdiction of that state. Statelessness, on the other hand, occurs when a person is not considered a national by any state under its laws. Stateless individuals in the Philippines can seek protection under laws such as Refugee and Stateless Persons Protection Act and through the Department of Justice Refugees and Stateless Persons Protection Unit. When we say stateless person, one that is not considered a national by any state under its law. So, wala siyang nationality. Example, those individuals born without nationality or losing it without acquiring another. So, stateless ka. But you also have a right. What is the right? The right to religion. What are your rights as a stateless person? You have the right to religion, education, courts, public relief, assistance, treatment, not less favorable than aliens and association. The right to nationality, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the right to nationality and no arbitrary deprivation or denial to change nationality. The rights of children. Every child shall have, without discrimination, the right to measures of protection required by their status as a minor from family, society, and the state. Every child shall be immediately registered after birth and be given a name. And third, every child has the right to acquire nationality. So what is the protective principle? This allows a state to exercise jurisdiction over foreign nationals for acts committed outside its territory if those acts directly threaten the state's security, sovereignty, or vital interests. This principle is commonly invoked in cases of espionage, treason, terrorism, counterfeiting, and other offenses that undermine a state's essential governmental functions regardless of where the offense occurs or the nationality of the perpetrator. Universal, Universality principle. A state may exercise jurisdiction over crimes committed without respect to the nationality of the offender on the ground that such crimes are declared as international crimes by the international community as a whole and thus prohibited by international law. So what are the examples? Jurisdiction is asserted with respect to acts considered committed against the whole world. Example, piracy, because pirates are enemies of the whole world. Now, passive personality principle. So, a state may exercise jurisdiction over crimes committed without respect to the nationality of the offender on the ground that such crimes are declared as international crimes by the international community as a whole and thus are prohibited by international law. Now, we have exceptions from jurisdiction, and what are these? First, an act of state doctrine. The act of state doctrine is a principle in international law that shields a sovereign state from being questioned in the courts of another state regarding its official acts conducted within its own territory. This doctrine is based on the principle of sovereignty and the need for judicial deference to the executive matters of foreign policy. It prevents domestic courts from evaluating the legality or validity of acts done by a foreign government within its jurisdiction. Next, international organizations and their officers. International organizations are entities established by treaties or other international agreements among states with specific functions and legal personality under international law. Their officers and personnel enjoy certain privileges and immunities to ensure the independent performance of their duties. These immunities include protection from legal processes and taxation in host states, but they are limited to acts performed in an official capacity. Now, another exception from jurisdiction is the diplomatic and consular law. It governs the conduct, privileges, and immunities of diplomatic agents and consular officers under the Vienna Conventions on Diplomatic and Consular Relations. Diplomats enjoy extensive immunity from the host state's jurisdiction, inviolability of premises, and personal security, enabling them to perform their functions without interference. Consular officers have more limited immunities and is mainly related to their official duties and may be subject to local jurisdiction in personal matters. So the general principles of treaty law. General principles of treaties. A treaty under international law is an international agreement concluded between the states in written form, governed by international law, embodied in a single instrument or in two or more related instruments, and whatever its particular designation. Treaty law is governed by the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which serves as the primary framework for the formation, application, and interpretation of treaties. The following are the general principles. Jus cogens. Jus cogens norm is a norm accepted and recognized by the international community of states as a whole as a norm from which no derogation is permitted and which can be modified only by a subsequent norm of general international law having the same character. What is the doctrine of state responsibility? The doctrine of state responsibility is a fundamental principle in international law that governs the accountability of states for their internationally wrongful acts. It establishes that when a state commits a breach of an international obligation, it incurs responsibility and must provide appropriate remedies, including reparation to the injured party. We have the concept of pacta sunt servanda, which means that international agreements must be performed in good faith. A treaty engagement is not a mere moral obligation but creates a legally binding obligation on the parties. What is rebus sic stantibus? So, it is a Latin phrase meaning things thus standing or while things remain as they are. It is a doctrine in international law that allows the termination or modification of a treaty when a fundamental change of circumstances occurs. This principle serves as an exception to the binding nature of treaties under pacta sunt servanda, which means agreements must be kept. This doctrine applies when the circumstances existing at the time of the treaty conclusion have undergone such a significant and unforeseen change that it becomes impossible or inequitable for a party to fulfill its obligations under the treaty. Obligation erga omnes. It is an obligation of every state towards the international community as a whole. All states have a legal interest in its compliance, and thus all states are entitled to invoke responsibility for breach of such an obligation. Obligation erga omnes are duties owed by states to the international community as a whole. These obligations are universally recognized and their breach is of concern to all states, not just the directly affected parties. Examples include prohibition on genocide, prohibition of slavery and slave trade, prohibition of aggression, prohibition of racial discrimination and apartheid, right to self-determination, prohibition of torture, and protection of the marine environment. Refugees. So refugees are defined by the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees and the 1967 Protocol relating to the status of refugees. So, what is a refugee? It is a person outside their country of nationality due to a well-founded fear of persecution, unable or willing to avail themselves of that country's protection. A refugee is someone outside their country of nationality due to a well-founded fear of persecution and unwilling to return due to such fear. General obligations. So refugees must conform to the laws and regulations of their host country, maintaining public order. Personal status is governed by the law of their domicile or residence. Rights dependent on personal status, including those related to marriage, are respected by contracting states. So what are the rights of refugees? First is to acquire movable and immovable property, protection of industrial property and rights in literary, artistic, and scientific works, rights to association, access to courts, wage earning employment, self-employment, practice liberal professions, housing, education and other elementary education, administrative assistance, freedom of movement, to be issued travel documents, be permitted to transfer their assets. Protection against expulsion. Generally, no expulsion or return of a refugee if their life or freedom would be threatened, except excludes refugees posing a security threat or convicted of a serious crime. The principle of non-refoulement. So no state can expel or return a refugee where their life or freedom would be threatened based on race, religion, nationality, social group, or political opinion. Now, treatment of aliens. We have this um, extradition. Fundamental principles. So, extradition is the surrender by one nation to another of an individual accused or convicted of an offense outside of its own territory and within the territorial jurisdiction of the other, which being competent to try and to punish him demands the surrender. Extradition is a sui generis proceeding. So, it is not a criminal proceeding which will call into operation all the rights of an accused as guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. While bail may be granted to the extraditee on the basis of clear and convincing evidence that he is not a flight risk, the potential extraditee must prove by clear and convincing evidence that he is not a flight risk and will abide by all the orders and processes of the extradition court. So let's talk about the International Human Rights Law. We have this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or UDHR. It is adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948 that serves as the foundation for international human rights law. What is its scope? It covers civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. What are the examples under this? Equality and freedom from discrimination, right to life, liberty, and security, prohibition of slavery and torture, freedom of expression, religion, and assembly, of course, economic rights such as the right to work, and adequate living standards. Okay, we also have this ICCP, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So this was adopted in 1966 and in force since 1976. It legally obligates states to protect civil and political rights. It addresses the rights necessary for individual freedoms and the protection of human dignity, such as right to life, prohibition of torture and cruel treatment, liberty and security, right to fair trial, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, political participation, and suffrage. We also have this International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, addressing the rights essential for well-being and equality, emphasizing progressive realization based on available resources, and it entered into force alongside with ICCP in 1976. What are the examples? Right to work, right to social security, adequate standard of living, health and education, and cultural rights. So what is the definition of human rights? Human rights are those fundamental and inalienable rights which are essential for life as human being. They are recognized by the international community as a whole through their protection and promotion under contemporary international law. International human rights law lays down the obligations of governments to act in certain ways or to refrain from certain acts in order to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms of individuals or groups. What are the categories of armed conflicts? So, international armed conflicts involve hostilities between two or more sovereign states. This category is extensively regulated under the Geneva Convention and the Additional Protocol 1. So, characteristics, there is a state-to-state hostilities. So, the conflict arises between two or more sovereign states. There is, there is no need for a declaration of war. An armed conflict exists when there is an actual use of armed force between states, even without a formal declaration of war. The applicability of Geneva Convention. So the entire body of Geneva Convention applies to IACs, ensuring protection for civilians, prisoners of war, and wounded or sick combatants. Next, the internal or non-international armed conflicts. So, ito naman, non-international armed conflicts occurs within the boundaries of a single state, involving hostilities between the government forces and non-state armed groups or between such groups themselves. So, they are regulated under Common Article 3 of the Geneva Convention and Additional Protocol 2. Characteristics: there are armed groups, and the conflict involves organized armed groups with a hierarchical command structure. Protracted violence, so the violence must reach a certain threshold, distinguishing it from mere riots or civil disturbances, and there is no involvement of other states, kaya internal. or non-international. So the conflict is confined to the territorial borders of a single state. We also have war on national liberation. So a war that refers to armed struggles waged by peoples under colonial domination, foreign occupation, or racist regimes to exercise their right to self-determination. These are considered a subset of international armed conflicts under Additional Protocol 1. Characteristics: colonial or foreign domination. It involves powers seeking independence from a colonial or foreign power. Self-determination. The struggle must be recognized as a legitimate exercise of the right to self-determination under international law. Recognition by the international community. The legitimacy of the struggle may depend on recognition by states or international organizations like the UN. Dispute resolution, peaceful means. So, pwedeng negotiation, mediation, arbitration, good offices. Yan. Coercive measures, economic sanctions, imposed to compel compliance without resorting to armed conflict, UN peacekeeping missions, deployed to maintain peace and stability in conflict zones, and intervention by the UN Security Council. Authorized to use force and impose measures under the UN Charter to address threats to international peace. Now, what are war crimes or crimes against international humanitarian law? So, in case of an international armed conflict, grave breaches of Geneva Conventions, namely any of the following acts, these are just example because marami kinds of war crimes. So, willful killing, torture, serious injury to body or health, extensive destruction of property, depriving a prisoner of war or other protected person of their rights to fair and regular trial, arbitrary deportation, taking of hostages, compelling prisoner of war or other protected person to serve in the forces of a hostile power, unjustifiable delay in the repatriation of prisoners of war. So, in case of non-international armed conflict, violence to life and person, willful killings, cruel treatment or torture, committing outrages upon personal dignity, taking hostages, and passing of sentences and carrying out of the execution without previous judgment pronounced by a regularly constituted court. We also have other serious violations of laws and customs applicable in armed conflict. So, madami din to, such as internationally directing attacks against civilian population, against civilian objects, against buildings, materials, medical units, and transport, against personal installations, vehicles, launching an attack in the knowledge that such attack will cause incidental loss of life or injury to civilians, launching an attack against works and installation containing dangerous forces. So, marami yan. Yan. So, the role of International Criminal Court. So, ICC serves as the permanent international tribunal to address the gravest crimes of concern to the international community, especially genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and other certain conditions of aggression. So, complementarity principle. The ICC operates under the principle of complementarity, meaning it can only prosecute cases when national courts are unwilling or unable to do so genuinely. So, this ensures respect for state sovereignty while addressing impunity for serious crimes. Judicial and arbitral settlements. So the resolution of international disputes through judicial and arbitral means underscores the importance of the rule of law in maintaining global peace and stability. These mechanisms provide structured processes to settle disputes between states and other entities under international law without resorting to force. International Court of Justice (ICJ), often called the World Court, is the principal judicial organ of the UN. So, contentious jurisdiction, it settles disputes between states that consents to its jurisdiction. Advisory jurisdiction, it provides non-binding advisory opinions on legal questions referred by the UN General Assembly, Security Council, or other authorized entities. Now, Permanent Court of Arbitration. So, arbitration, the PCA Permanent Court of Arbitration facilitates for arbitration and conciliation of disputes involving states, state entities, intergovernmental organizations, and private parties. It has a flexible procedure. Unlike the ICJ, the PCA allows parties to tailor arbitration procedures, including appointing of arbitrators and defining applicable laws. So, a relevant case here is the case of Philippines versus the Republic of China on the dispute sa South China Sea Maritime Zone. So, peaceful settlement of international disputes. So, states are obliged to settle disputes by peaceful means to prevent threats to international peace and security. So, what are the methods? Negotiation, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, and judicial settlement. So, the use of force, short war. The UN prohibits the use of force except in self-defense or with Security Council authorization. States, however, may engage in measures short of war, such as economic sanctions, naval blockades, nonviolent actions to prevent access to specific areas, diplomatic measures, severing diplomatic relations to express disapproval of actions. So, bawal ang force, pero pwede ang economic sanction yon. Yung parang you will restrict trade from that state. Yan. Naval blockades, hindi mo pwedeng padaanin sa internal waters mo. Yan. Basta non-violent. Yan. Or yung diplomatic relations nyo ay i-terminate nyo na. Ayan. So, what so ito naman, war and neutrality. So what is the treatment of civilians? So civilians are protected under the Geneva Convention, which prohibit attacks on non-combatants and require human treatment. So acts such as targeting civilians, starvation as a method of warfare, and forced displacement are violations of the international human law. Obligations include the provision of basic needs such as food, medical care, and shelter during armed conflict. So sa prisoners of war naman, they are entitled to protection also under the Geneva Convention, such as humane treatment without any form of discrimination, access to medical care and sufficient food, prohibition on torture, coercion, and acts of reprisal, rights to communicate with family and receive relief supplies. So they must also be released and repatriated without delay after the cessation of hostilities. The law of the sea. So the law of the sea governs maritime rights and responsibilities including navigation, resource management, and territory sovereignty. It is codified primarily in the UNCLOS and establishes the framework for the peaceful use and management of the world's oceans. We have this ITCLOS. So, ito naman yung tribunal under the UNCLOS. So, it is an independent judicial body established by UNCLOS to resolve disputes related to the interpretation or application of the convention. So, it is composed by 21 judges elected by the state parties to UNCLOS, ensuring geographical representation. And what is its jurisdiction? It handles disputes involving maritime delimitation, fishing rights, navigation, marine environment protection, and the conservation of resources. It also has jurisdiction over disputes concerning the International Seabed Authority and cases brought under its advisory opinion mechanism. It has a special chamber which includes a seabed disputes chamber to address specific issues like deep sea mining. So we have freedom of navigation. So this is a principle of customary international law enshrined under the UNCLOS. It ensures the unimpeded movement of ships across international waters, critical for global trade and security. So, sa high seas yun, high seas freedom. So, ships of all states enjoy the freedom to navigate, overfly, lay submarine cables, and conduct scientific research in the high seas. We also have the right of innocent passage. So, foreign vessels can traverse territorial seas without engaging in activities prejudicial to the coastal state's security. Yung exclusive economic zone, these are coastal states that the coastal states have sovereign rights over the resources but must allow freedom of navigation within the EEZ. Now, maritime and territorial disputes. So, these arise from overlapping claims to territorial seas, exclusive economic zones, or continental shelves. International environmental law. So, the Stockholm Declaration. It embodies the dual concept of sovereignty and responsibility in environmental governance. So, it affirms the state's sovereign right to exploit its natural resources in accordance with its policies while imposing an obligation to prevent environmental harm to other states. This principle is the foundation for the no harm rule, which mandates the activities within a state's jurisdiction must not cause transboundary damage. Precautionary principle. When an activity raises threats of harm to the environment or human health, precautionary measures should be taken even if some cause and effect relationships are fully established scientifically. It advocates for proactive measures to protect the environment even in the absence of full scientific certainty about potential or impending harm. So that ends pala political law on national territory and public international law. Now let's talk about the constitutional commissions. So under pa rin sa 1987 commission, we have constitutional commissions, namely the Commission on Audit, the Civil Service Commission, and the Commission on Election. So what are the constitutional safeguards to ensure independence? They are constitutionally created. So these three are constitutionally created. Hence, it cannot be abolished by a statute. Each commission is vested with powers and functions which cannot be reduced by statute. Otherwise, it is unconstitutional. They are independent constitutional bodies. The chairman and members may not be removed except by impeachment. They have a fixed term of office of 7 years in a rotational scheme. So they have staggered terms of 7 years with uniform reckoning date, and it's designed to ensure that at no point in the entire membership of the commission is appointed by a single president. So hence, the promotional appointments are allowed only insofar as they do not disturb the rotation cycle. The chairman and members may not be appointed in an acting capacity, and the salaries of the chairman and the members may not be decreased during their tenure. And they also enjoy fiscal autonomy. Each commission may promulgate its own procedural rules provided they do not diminish, increase, or modify substantive rights. And the commission may appoint their own officials and employees in accordance with the civil service law. So, yun nga, they are constitutionally creative administrative agency, and the grant of a constitutional commission's rulemaking power is untouchable by Congress, absent a constitutional amendment or revision. However, the laws of the commission interprets and enforces fall within the prerogative of Congress. So, as an administrative agency, its quasi-legislative power is subject to the same limitations applicable to other administrative bodies. The chairman and the commissioners shall be appointed by the president with the consent of the Commission on Appointments for a term of 7 years without reappointment. Of those first appointed, the chairman shall hold office for 7 years, one commissioner for 5 years, and the other for 3 years without reappointment. Appointment to any vacancy shall only be for the unexpired portion of the term of the predecessor, and in no case shall any member be appointed or designated in temporary or acting capacity. So what are the functions, powers, and jurisdiction of the Civil Service Commission? So, the Civil Service Commission as a central personal agency of the government, so HR ng gobyerno, shall establish a career service and adopt measures to promote moral efficiency, integrity, responsiveness, progressiveness, and courtesy in the civil service. It shall strengthen the merit and reward system, integrate all human resources development programs for all levels and ranks, and institutionalize a management climate conducive to public accountability. It shall submit to the President and the Congress an annual report on its personnel programs. So, what are their functions? They implement various laws governing appointments to, removals from, discipline, and benefits within the civil service. In the exercise of its powers to implement, granting civil service eligibility to employees under provisional or temporary status who have rendered 7 years of efficient service. The CSC enjoys a wide latitude of discretion and may not be compelled by mandamus. So under the Admin Code, the Civil Service Commission has the power to hear and decide admin cases instituted before it, directly or on appeal, including contested appointments. The Commission has original jurisdiction to hear and decide a complaint for cheating in the civil service examination committed by government employees. It is the intent of the Civil Service Law in requiring the establishment of a grievance procedure that decisions of lower level officials in cases involving personal actions be appealed to the agency head, then to the Civil Service Commission. So, as a central personal agency of the government, it has a broad authority to pass upon all civil service matters. The mandate of CSC should therefore be read as a comprehensive authority to perform all functions necessary to ensure the efficient administration of the entire civil service, including the central executive service. Further, the specific powers of the CESB or the Central Executive Service Board must be narrowly interpreted as exceptions to the comprehensive authority granted to the CSC by the Constitution and relevant statutes. Okay, the scope of civil service. It embraces all branches, subdivisions, instrumentalities, and agencies of the government, including GOCCs with original charter. Pag walang original charter, labor code. Yan. So, the civil service does not include GOCCs which are organized under the General Corporation Law, so those registered under the SEC. Yan. Jurisdiction granted by the Constitution and the Administrative Code over all civil service position in the government service, whether career or non-career. So, there are Board of Regents of the State University, which has the sole power of administration over universities, but there is no showing that such power is exclusive. So the CSC has concurrent jurisdiction over the president of a state university. It also has an appellate jurisdiction. So the appellate power of the CSC will only apply when the subject of the administrative cases filed against erring employees is in connection with the duties and functions of their office, and not in cases where the acts of the complaint arose from cheating in the civil service examination. In admin disciplinary cases decided by the COA, the proper remedy in case of an adverse decision is an appeal to the CSC and not a petition for certiorari before the Supreme Court under Rule 64. PNRC, although not a GOCC, is a sui generis in character. So the sui generis character of PNRC or Red Cross requires the court to approach controversies involving Red Cross on a case-to-case basis. Since the issue involves enforcement of labor laws and penal statutes, Red Cross can be treated as a GOCC. Thus, the CSC has jurisdiction. Moreover, the CSC has appellate jurisdiction on admin disciplinary cases involving the imposition of a penalty of suspension more than 30 days or a fine exceeding 30 days salary. Yan. So, another constitutional commission is the COMELEC. So, it enforces all laws relating to the conduct of elections, plebiscite, initiative, referendum, and recall. So what are these? Initiative is the power of the people to propose amendments to the Constitution or to propose and enact legislation through an election called for that purpose. So there are three systems of initiative. Initiative on Constitution, initiative on statutes, and initiative on local legislation. Ano naman ang referendum? It is the power of the electorate to approve or reject legislation through an election called for that purpose, not counting constitutionally required ratifications. There are two classes, referendum on statutes or referendum on local laws. Okay, recall the termination of the official relationship of a local elective official for loss of confidence prior to the expiration of his term through the will of the electorate. And plebiscite is the submission of constitutional amendments or the incorporation and related alterations of LGUs to the people for their approval. COMELEC also recommends to the Congress effective measures to minimize election spending and to prevent and penalize all forms of election frauds, offenses, malpractices, and nuisance candidates. They also submit to the President and the Congress a comprehensive report on the conduct of each election, plebiscite, initiative, referendum, or recall. They also decide administrative questions pertaining to elections except the right to vote because it is under the judiciary. The power to declare the failure of an election. The COMELEC may exercise such power motu proprio or upon a verified petition, and the hearing of this case shall be summary in nature. File petitions in court for inclusion or exclusion of voters, and investigate and prosecute cases of violations of election laws. They also have the power to decide on election cases. The Commission on Election may sit en banc or in two divisions and shall promulgate its rules of procedure in order to expedite disposition of election cases. The Constitution also vested the COMELEC judicial powers to decide all contests relating to local officials as therein provided. It has also exclusive jurisdiction on all contests relating to elections, returns, qualifications of all elective regional, provincial, and city officials. Currently, the enforcement of election laws may be concurrent when Congress assigns such enforcement to a different body. They also have the power to examine, audit, and settle accounts pertaining to government funds and property, its revenue, receipts, expenditures, and uses. LGUs through granted local fiscal autonomy are still within the audit jurisdiction on the Commission on Audit. Nasa Commission on Audit na pala tayo. The Boy Scouts of the Philippines is a public corporation and its funds are subject to COA's audit jurisdiction. The Constitution formally embodies a long-established rule that private entities who handle government funds or subsidies in trust may be examined or audited in their handling of said funds by the government auditors, COA. Exclusive authority define the scope of its audit examination, establish techniques and methods required, promulgate accounting and auditing rules and regulations. This also includes giving the COA Assistant Commissioner, and General Counsel the authority to deputize a special audit team. Note that no law shall be passed exempting any entity of the government or any of its subsidiaries in any guise whatsoever, or any investment of public funds from the jurisdiction of the COA. The Congress cannot exempt foreign grants from the jurisdiction of the COA. Its jurisdiction extends to all GOCCs, including those funded by donations through the government. What is its primary jurisdiction over money claims? But limited to liquidated claims. So the COA has primary jurisdiction to pass upon a private entity's money claims against a provincial government. However, the scope of COA's authority to take cognizance of claims is circumscribed by cases holding statutes of similar import to mean only liquidated claims or those determined or readily determined from vouchers, invoices, and such other papers within reach of accounting officers. No jurisdiction over their validity or constitutionality. The jurisdiction of COA over money claims against the government does not include the power to rule on the constitutionality or validity. So the composition and qualifications of members of the Civil Service Commission. So sa CSC, may chairman and 2 commissioners. Qualifications, of course, natural born, and at the time of the appointment, at least 35 years old, with proven capacity for public administration, and must not have been a candidate for elective position in the election immediately preceding their appointment. 7 years term. Okay. Sa COMELEC composition, may 1 chairman and 6 commissioners. Of course, natural born, 35 years of age, holders of a college degree. Has not been a candidate in the previous election immediately preceding the appointment. Majority, including the chairman, must be a member of the Philippine Bar who have been engaged in the practice of law for at least 10 years. COMELEC. Now, COA or Commission on Audit. The composition, a chairman and 2 commissioners, natural-born citizen, at least 35 years of age, CPAs with not less than 10 years of auditing experience, or member of the Philippine Bar with at least 10 years of practice. And we have to note that at no time shall all the members belong to the same profession. So, pwedeng dalawang CPA, isang lawyer. Dalawang lawyer, isang CPA. Hindi pwedeng tatlong lawyer, tatlong CPA. So, the composition and qualifications on promotional appointment of commissioner to chairman. So, the Constitution does not prohibit promotional appointment from commissioner to chairman as long as the commissioner has not served the full term of 7 years, and the appointment of vacancy shall only be for the unexpired portion of the term of the predecessor. Also, the promotional appointment must conform to the rotational plan or the staggering of terms in the commission of membership. So, examples. If the commissioner has already served 5 years, she cannot be promoted to a fresh chairmanship of 7 years. If the commissioner has already served 5 years, she cannot be promoted to chair if the unexpired portion of the latter is anything more than 2 years. If the commissioner has already served 2 years and there is a vacancy in the chair for 4 years, she can be promoted to chairmanship. The 1 year in what would have been the 7-year tenure in the commission is already forfeited. So what are the prohibited office and interests? So no member of the CONCON or constitutional commissions shall during their tenure hold any other office or employment. This is similar to the prohibition against high executive officers, and it applies to both public and private officers and offices and employment. They cannot also engage in the practice of their profession. They cannot also engage in the active management or control of any business which in any way may be affected by the functions of his office. Or they cannot be also financially be interested directly or indirectly in any contract with or in any franchise or privilege granted by the government, its subdivisions, agencies, or instrumentalities, including GOCCs or their subsidiaries. And lastly, the CSE chairman cannot be a member of the government entity that is under the control of the president without impairing the independence vested by within the CSC.